Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome to Product Audio. Today we're going to be breaking down how to make an Italo disco track with vocals, the same one you just heard in the intro right there. Let's get right into it. So the first step when I started creating the track is I started to think of coming up with a lead sound. And for my first patch, I ended up on this one. Then I went ahead and wrote the melody, which sounds like this. Now, due to the slightly faster BPM of this track and the busier nature of the riff, I slightly started to modify the sound, bringing down the delay a little bit. I also automated the mod wheel, which is linked to the cutoff in this patch just to create a fade-in effect, and then finally added some low-cut EQ to fit it better into the mix. So then next, I went and I started playing around with concepts for the bass. And here's the melody that I came up with for this bass line. Then for the bass, I just raised the mod wheel a bit to lower the cutoff. I put on a little bit of EQ and then added this plugin called Super VHS, which just gives it some retro vibe and saturation. Then what I ended up doing is I started creating some of my sends. Now for the sends, I got 3 reverbs, a medium hall, a large hall, a small plate reverb for drums, a delay, and a stereo width processor. So together with the sends, everything sounds like this. Alright, so starting to get that really big spacey sound. Next, I thought, okay, let's add another lead to the intro to extend the vibe and to start extending the intro and building on the track. Then I just decided to edit the sound a little bit to fit it into this particular track's vibe. So what I did is I just started raising the chorus a little bit and modifying the delay settings. Also, then I added the sends of the reverb and delay, and here's what it all sounds like now. I thought, okay, that sounds good, but I need some kind of transition right there, some kind of splash sound to really make it come together. So I just started going through my effects that I have here. I thought that one worked pretty well, so I just added a little bit of extra chorus, a little bit of low cut. So let's hear how they sound all together. All right, that's working really well. Now the next thing I went to is I started working on the drums. So that's our kick drum. Here I added a plugin called Kick Shaper, which is like a compressor dynamics frequency processor, and just did a little bit of low cut on the EQ. Let's go to the snare drum. On the snare drum, what I did is I actually stacked 2 sounds. There's a high end sound. There's a low end sound. And then I just put on a Kick Shaper, which is really a general dynamics processor. I did some EQ cut of the lows and highs. I put a transient designer and a clipper to kill some of those sharp peaks for mixing, and then just added a good fat 80s plate reverb. Then we can go to the hi-hats. So there's a crash with a bunch of delay. Then we have a basic closed and open hi-hat pattern. The hi-hats basically just have a bunch of EQ cutting the low end, a little bit of the high end, and some chorus. That's about it. The last thing for the drums is just some toms. On the toms, I just put a little bit of that plate reverb send, a transient designer to kill some of the peaks and make it a little longer, and some basic EQ. Just like that, a nice tight 80s tom. So all together. That's the rhythmic foundation of the track right there. So next here, what I put is a K1V sampler. This is a free retro 80s sampler plugin. And I put this because for a truly authentic record vibe, you really want to mix up a little bit of samplers, digital, maybe even acoustic elements. It shouldn't just be 100% analog synths. And that just really gives it some of that authentic finished record flavor. You can hear that really sampled sounding string pad. So what I did there is, again, I put those sends, which is the reverb and delay. Then I added a bit crusher for a little bit of high-end sparkle. This is a chorus effect, then another chorus effect. And then here's the real key to the sound, is this delay pedal. And then thinned it out with the EQ. So together it sounds like this. Just gives it a bit of atmosphere, a little bit of something extra. And then the next sound I added to fill out the atmosphere was another one of these K1V sounds. And that was a ping like this. Again, you got another sampler bass sound. So when we add back in the sends, there's a lot of air right there. And then I added a filter just to lower the high end. And it also has a chorus that I put on there and another one of those delays with a little bit of high boost. Very similar effect chain to the last one. And together it gives this effect. So I started extending out the arrangement a little bit to get the full song going. So here I took that intro melody and I started building the hook with it. And it's just the same exact sound and same exact melody, but when you play it with all the other elements that we built so far, it sounds like this. And I put in one more sampler instrument here just to really fill out the hook portion. And this is another free one that you should definitely check out. All I put here is a little bit of EQ and reverb. And this is an Emulator 1 plugin. And this just helps to fill out the atmosphere a little bit right here. Then I started developing the chord foundation. So here what I did is I used Diva again. And again, just basic EQ thinning and just a little bit of saturation. And this one has a pitch wobble with the Super VHS. This is one of the patches from my Italo bank again. And what I did is I put the chords here, and then as I traveled through the song, here the mod wheel is up, which gives it that really low cutoff sound. And then when I move here, it gets brighter. And I also used it just to fill out the hook a little bit. Just some high notes a little bit right there. Now let's see how it sounds on the verse. So really, it's really subtle. So what I wanted to do is to fill it out a little bit more and layer the sound. So what I did is I added this other Diva sound, a key sound. So again, I put on Super VHS and the EQ. Again, the mod wheel is way down. But together, how does it sound? Sounds like this. For the verse lead, I actually used the Arturia DX7 plugin. I brightened it up a little bit with an exciter and used several dynamic EQ style plugins just to reduce some of that harsh resonance for the mix. And then finally, just a little bit of high EQ boost. Now our instrumental is almost finished, but there's one last thing right here at the end. And this is actually another Diva riff, simply with a little bit of low cut. Sounds just like this on its own, and I added just a very little amount of reverb. Now let's hear it together. That's actually the full instrumental right there. So next, let's just go into the vocals real quick, and I'll show you how I did the vocals.
I smile when you look my way. With you's where I want to be.
And then I went ahead here and actually recorded 3 separate layers. On each layer, I used some Melodyne to clean up the notes, and then I used some auto-tune for that clean robotic effect. Then just a little bit of EQ bass cut, a vocal shaper dynamics processor / compressor, and exciter for some extra top end. And I only ended up using 2 of the layers for the final. And then when you put them together, get this kind of sound.
I smile when you look my way.
Then I also did a hook part.
Whoa, yeah, you are my fantasy.
And then there's the ending bridge.
I'm falling for you fast, I'm falling for you fast.
And once I bounced it out, I put it right here, back in my main project. There's the main vocal layer with the secondary layer. Now I just added a little bit of final time correction and added some dynamics processing with a vocal writer and a compressor. Just a little bit of saturation, a little bit of light chorus, and a bass cut EQ. And then I put on the sends for the reverb and delay. Now I did the hook a little bit differently just because it was tricky to sing. So to keep things clean, I only wanted to focus on the main layer. The secondary layer I turned way down and made it into an effect with heavy delay and chorus and EQ. And then for the final layer, I just copy and paste the main layer and add a waves harmonizer, which gives it a detune and octave double effect, again with heavy chorusing and EQ.
Whoa, yeah, you are my fantasy.
At this point, I felt like I was done and I was ready to go to the master. Now, all I use for my mastering right now is one simple plugin, and it's called Faster Master. So I just shifted the tonal balance a bit. The transients, I chose to soften them a little bit, less punch, added a little bit more compression above the light. And then this one gave me a whole bunch of stereo width. I turned it down a little bit to give it that more old school classic sound. And then now it just gives you the option for limiting. So then when you limit, I go to -8 LUFS, which is the loudest portion of the track. So really it's sitting around -9, which is a very good LUFS. That's just your final gain. So that's it. The track is now done. I really appreciate you sticking around for the tutorial. Please like, subscribe, check out the presets and the link down below, and follow me for more content just like this. Now I'm going to play the full track and you can hear it completed.